evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and tonight we'll be returning to a topic we visit often here on Public Perspective, and that is the subject of learning. And tonight we'll take a little different spin on it, and we're going to look at online learning. So our guest tonight is Professor Karen Swan from the University of Illinois at Springfield. Karen, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And I should say before we get started that you are also an associate at the Center for Online
I'm a
Research.
research associate in the Center for Online Learning, Research, and Service, COLORS.
Colors. Thank you. So I don't have to go look at my notes to figure it out. So you've got that all right. You know how you know what it says, right? So what I'm interested in, and people who've watched the show with any regularity know that we talk about education and how children learn, how adults learn, and as you know, and as our audience may know, a lot of education is now moving to the web, and I'm sure will find its way onto mobile devices and mobile applications as well.
It is.
Future. So this is it's not just a new technology, it's a new way of learning and a new way of teaching as well. So let's start with the history. I know before the show we talked a little bit about the concept of online learning is older than most people think. So why don't we start with the history, and then we'll work up and see where we are today and talk about how it's working and how parts of it may not be working. When did this all get started?
Well, it really started in the early 80s. There's a couple of people at New Jersey Institute of Technology, Roxanne Hiltz and Murray Turoff, who actually met there and fell in love and had this vision of having education through networks of computers. And they wrote a book called Network Nation, and Murray was a computer scientist and Roxanne is a sociologist. And
great combination.
Yeah, it was actually for what they were doing. So they put together, what was it called? It's called Online Classroom or something like that they built, and they started teaching people using this technology.
Now, this was long before visual computers. I mean, this was before the internet, the internet existed, but before the web, before the internet was publicly known.
It's BitNet
right?
back then. It's not even what we call the internet. It's the BitNet that was DARPANet that's connecting colleges. It's not running the way it runs now, that they started this with. And there's also a woman named Linda Harrison at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver who started doing this work, and Lonnie Gunawardena, who was doing something with global communications between Mexico and Texas. And all of these people who started using just text-based communication to teach over distance.
And this was the old 80-character wide screens.
No. These are college computers, so they're not Apples.
No. This is before.
They're terminals.
Sure, these are old green screen computer terminals.
We had
type
Apples in
things.
the 80s.
But they weren't being used for this, correct?
No, they weren't. Yeah. These are college courses that are being taught over distance.
So fast forward a little bit. Now the web hits the scene, and that certainly changes the entire character of the internet.
It just totally changed everything overnight. It was amazing. It was really a sort of a esoteric thing that people did with colleges so that scholars could communicate with each other. And almost overnight it became a commercial entity.
Yes, just a few years.
Yeah, really just a few years.
So let's fast forward then to today, and now what we see in online learning today. Describe what the world looks like today for online learning.
The world is quite various for online learning, just as education anywhere is various. There's research that says that over a third of all college students will take every year at least one online course. I know at UIS, almost a third of our students are enrolled in online programs. More than 75% take at least one online course every year. And we have more courses where students are mixing online and face-to-face courses than anything else.
So as a professor yourself and teaching online courses, what do you see as being, well, first let's start with the advantages and then disadvantages. So what is it about online teaching that appeals to you?
I could do it in my pajamas. The most appealing thing, the first and biggest advantage, I think, of online learning is access. It gives access to people who would not have access to college education if they had to come 9 to 5 and sit in classrooms. And these days, 3/4 of our population are non-traditional students. We don't have people who go to college for, leave high school, go to college for 4 years very much anymore. We have people who are working, people who have families. So online learning makes it possible for a good percentage of them to go to school.
As a teacher, is it something that you, I mean, other than working in your pajamas, are there advantages that you feel are available to you as a teacher with the online world?
Absolutely. That's why I do it. For me, I feel like I can relate to every single student in my class because can take the time to individually journal with them, read their discussion. I give more assignments online than I ever would in class, and I can give them more feedback. I have students redo stuff so that I'm sure they're learning. I would walk right by them on the street, but I feel like I know them better online, and I really do, which is why people like to teach.
Yes, I guess viewers of the show know I taught for a brief while at community college as well. Now, before the show, you mentioned your son, Sam Mitrani, who has been on this show before. He is also a professor now. You've mentioned that he shies away from online learning, and talk a little bit about what he sees, and that would be the other side of the story from what you see.
Sam thinks it's first place, it's a lot more work. And Sam teaches at colleges of DuPage, and he teaches 5 classes that have 30 students in each. I teach 2 classes with 20 students, and they're graduate students.
Very
so
different.
It's a kind of a different thing. But Sam likes to profess, and it isn't exactly the best medium for professing. There are people who tape their lectures, but if you've ever lectured, taping a lecture isn't the same as actually giving a lecture. And a lot of the people that tape their lectures want to do it in front of students because there's something there that you sort of feed on that you need. And Sam doesn't get that.
When he's doing it online, so
Yeah.
he misses that. Now, there is, and I myself having taught and also being a performer, I play in a band, and I know the difference between trying to play music in a studio for recording and playing music live when there's a crowd. And it produces really different music. You play the same songs with the same musicians, but the quality of the performance is notably different in a live setting from what it is in a studio. So I would think that in teaching, that element of that live interaction may be important to learning.
I think it's very important to learning. But, excuse me, in most online learning, it's text-based. And it's asynchronous, meaning that it's separated in time as well as in distance. So it's delayed, but it's not like you're not interacting. You might be interacting more because online we can have a discussion that we make everybody participate in. In class, you're limited by time. So not so many people can participate, nor can they reflect on what they're saying. So when you have a discussion going in class, you're sitting there waiting to have your turn.
Right.
So all you're thinking about is what you want to say, and you're
Right.
not thinking about the discussion. In online learning, the way the discussion evolves, you can put your comment anywhere you want, and you can respond to what you're doing, and you can reflect on what you're saying, and the discussion becomes really mindful and really different. It's what drew me to online learning to begin with. So that's just one example. You can have collaborative work that isn't like getting in the corner of the classroom and trying to get it done before the end of class. It's like you can do it online using a whole bunch of tools that we have now to communicate with your group. So there's all kinds of things we can do online.
Now, when I think about online, though, one of the things that occurs to me is that the person on the other end, you don't necessarily know who that is or whether you're dealing with one person or that person's substitute or that person's best friend who's sitting in for him or her. How do you control for that?
I don't. I mean, some people care about it. There's ways of controlling for it. There's several companies that that do proctoring for tests. I've been to visit them. There's people sitting there with 6 monitors watching while people take tests,
Oh,
and they
so
have
you
to
have to
hold
have
up
your
a driver's license, and
Oh, okay.
and fingerprints. It's serious. But I have so many assignments in my class, and they're so complex, and they're not true-false kinds of answers. I teach education courses that if somebody wants to do it for somebody else, far be it. You know, it does. These are grown-ups.
Well, it's graduate students, right? So,
Yeah.
and especially with that student body, it's unlikely that a graduate student, having taken the time and effort and expense to do this, would have someone else do it for him or her.
It would be hard to cheat. It would be really hard to cheat because most of my assignments are personalized too. I have people adapt them to their own situations.
So if they're, yes, so. And
So I
that
teach a lot
there's-
of technology courses. So I ask them to create something for their class, or to design a lesson, or in ed research to look to create a research proposal for their situation.
Now, let me ask you about the subject matter. Are there some subject content areas that would be more amenable to online learning versus others? I mean, so for example, of a physics class or an advanced mathematics class, would that be easier or harder? Is there any way to tell?
I think it depends on what part of physics and what. I think you're right. I think there are some things that are more amenable. I think all media have affordances and constraints that they support certain kinds of knowing and marginalize others. And what I think is good online, there's research that shows that conceptual learning is better online. Because, like I was saying about being mindful, you can take the time and you can have a discussion that brings things out. So philosophy is great online. And certain kinds of physics is great online. It used to be we had a hard time with math and physics because we couldn't write the symbols.
Right.
And that was really a problem. So somebody couldn't just go writing on a board the way they would in a classroom. But now we have all kinds of things that do that. And there's ways you can do experiments in physics and chemistry and in some of the biological sciences that you couldn't do in a regular classroom because they're too dangerous or they're too expensive.
But you can do simulations online?
Yeah, and you can show those things, and there's all sorts of things that you can do with, there's remote labs.
How does
There's
that
like
work?
a robot at one end that puts the things together, and the students manipulate from one end to the other end, and they're mixing chemicals, they're doing physics experiments, they're doing all sorts of things that from a distance into a remote lab.
So if they blow up the robot by accident, then nobody gets hurt.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But they tend not to, but you
Yes,
know.
right.
And a lot of online courses also have kits that you send out. And there's kitchen physics and kitchen chemistry. And some things are better and some things are not so good. But
Now, when reading about online learning, the concept that comes up a lot in the news media is the massively open online courses, the so-called MOOC or MOOCs. And the research there seems to be that the initial promise of these massively open courses has not really been fulfilled.
they're changing.
What's happening there?
But originally some people at Stanford and at MIT decided to open these courses, and the first
where
one was
hundreds or sometimes thousands of people sign up as students.
160,000 in the 160,000 in the AI course that Sebastian Thrun first taught at Stanford, and quit and formed Udacity.
Which, by the way, struggled with that model, Udacity. I think, in fact, he has now shifted to doing
They're doing
corporate
something
education.
else. Yeah, they're doing
Right.
corporate a lot, and they're doing. I think Udacity's doing something with Georgia State, where they're doing a master's degree in computer science through Udacity courses for much less than it would cost to get the regular Georgia State. So it seems to work, but these are very smart people teaching at elite institutions, and they thought they could do this for people at community colleges who probably don't have the same background or education that they did. So Udacity tried something with San Jose State, and even flipping the classrooms and reducing the classes to 150 students, they still did worse than the regular teachers. So it was kind of a...
And were they able to determine why that was?
I don't know why it was, and I'm not sure they know why it was. Well, let's start out with the fact that they're not educators. So they're trying to do something that Skinner was doing back in the 50s with teaching machines. They weren't even branching. We did some research on this. So we looked at, I think maybe 7 Udacity courses, a lot of Coursera courses, some other ones, because we're looking at the pedagogy, and the pedagogy is really a push kind of pedagogy. It's not interactive, and the Udacity, the computer science behind the Udacity courses is fabulous.
Because they were computer scientists.
Yeah, right.
Of
They have a video, and in the middle of it, they put multiple choice questions, and they're hard multiple choice. There's like multiples. You have to get 4 out of 16 of the right answers, and it's pretty cool. But it doesn't branch. It doesn't do anything if you don't get it. It doesn't take you back, and
Oh, it doesn't give you alternatives. It doesn't try to step you through it if you're not understanding
if you're
it?
smart, if you know the stuff, it doesn't move you around it, or if you can't get it, it doesn't try something else, which a lot of the things that you get from that we've known about since the 70s and 80s, these kind of programs do. Plus, they just Sebastian Thrun's actually quite a interesting and humble guy. He
from what I've read, he was shocked at the low performance.
Yeah,
of these
right,
classes.
and he was willing to listen to educators. I've had dinner with him, and he's really he really realized that he really didn't know what he was doing to begin with, and he's really trying to get it better. And a lot of other courses are trying to do other things with it. Now they're offering certificates and different ways of doing it. But the problem is with that many people, you either have to have multiple choice or you have to have students grade each other. And it sort of works, but...
Well, now, I know, particularly with Sebastian Thun, the feeling was that they could educate the third world here.
They can educate really smart people in the third world. That's what they found out.
But only people, who, as you say, who already had a significant amount of background who can understand.
No. There's actually they have examples of a 14-year-old kid in India who did better than any of the Stanford students, and he was a child. So it isn't this really smart people. It isn't necessarily the
best educated. It's the people who can catch on the quickest.
Right.
So what do you think is going to evolve then out of these massively open online? I mean, I said the numbers have been dramatically reduced.
They haven't been dramatic. They're still growing.
No, I mean the
number
of students in a class.
Yeah, maybe. It depends on what you count as students. A lot of people sign up for all these things. I just signed up for one in coding, and I still haven't done it, for example.
Okay.
A lot of people sign up for them and don't do them. So the people who are studying these things, and there's massive amounts of data produced by MOOCs. So only about 15% of the people who sign up for them actually
finish?
actually do anything beyond.
Besides signing up.
Yeah, and maybe watching the videos.
Wow.
So people have categorized the people who take them as different. So it depends on what you think is a success. For the people who finish, they're a success. For most people who take them, my daughter took a whole bunch of them when she was trying to get into pharmacy school to rethink her physics and math and other things, but she never finished them. But they were really, really useful to her because they helped her to just bone up on the things that she had forgotten. She didn't have to take the whole thing. Actually,
I did that in college with I took typing, which has turned out to be one of the most useful skills I ever
Yeah,
develop.
right.
But I remember the typing teacher said, you don't have to finish this class. You just have to learn how to type.
Right,
And
exactly.
So, which is what happened to most people. They got the hang of it and dropped out.
Over 50% of the people who actually interact with MOOCs have at least a bachelor's degree. My husband's cousin, who is has a doctorate in biology, she's taken a few of them just because there's something she's interested in, and she wants to do them. So for people at that level, a lot of alumni are taking MOOCs.
It's just because they see something they want to know. I want to learn something more about
Yeah,
this,
right.
and that they're not concerned about finishing it or even getting a grade. Right? They're not doing it
No,
for
they
that
don't
reason.
care about it for that reason. So they aren't doing what they thought they would do, but they might be doing something else that's equally good.
So with online learning, how do you see this evolving? I mean, one of the things I read is that online learning is so much more cost effective that eventually it will replace universities altogether. That seems like an extreme view, but there must be some sort of middle ground. How do you see this fitting in or growing in the context of overall? Let's talk about post-secondary education. You are.
Well, we know that MOOCs don't work. So cost effectiveness probably isn't what online learning is going to do. Because for most college teaching, you need to have a teacher, and that's not cost effective.
Right, that's the biggest expense. Well, although if you have
Adjuncts?
Adjuncts who are dismally, having been one myself, I can attest to the dismal
Who are
pay.
miserably paid.
Miserably paid, yes.
And we've switched. You know, when I first started in 1988 teaching, it was 60% full-time faculty tenured, and whatever the rest was adjuncts. It's reversed now. But what costs us for things like online learning and everything else is administrators. We now have more administrators almost than faculty. So it isn't as...
You're not saving the money you thought you would save.
Well, we're not. No, we're not. And people keep looking for it, but online learning, I don't think, is going to do that.
And you yourself mentioned that as a teacher for an online class, it doesn't make the teacher's job any easier. If anything, it may add work.
Yeah, it does, because it doesn't really, I've looked at it, it doesn't make more time exactly, because you have to prep for a class, you go to a class, you teach it, and then you hang around afterwards and you leave. But that amount of time that you spend with students interacting with you, you have to make up for it somehow. So you have to have assignments every week in a way that you wouldn't have to have in class, because that's your interaction.
Right.
So you might have, I don't do taped lectures, but I do written lectures with lots of links out to things on the web. And students do those, but they still need to interact with me to feel like they're learning. So they have, in my classes, 4 or 5 things they have to do every 2 weeks.
Well, so it's the teachers, I mean, teachers who are really motivated by trying to find innovative ways to learn, I'm sure would look at this and embrace it. But many teachers, and as regular viewers know, I sit on the board of a local high school, public high school, and so a lot of teachers are just, it's a job, and they come and they do their job and they go home. And some are very motivated to see how the students can learn anew, and some are just coming in to do the job, and that's it. So unless you had a school of completely motivated teachers, or if there was some compelling economic reason, what other reason would there be for online learning from the not from the student's point of view? I can understand the convenience for them, but from the educational institution point of view, what's the motivation for educational institutions to try to go further down this road?
Because there's a lot of students there. There's a lot more,
Well, you can reach more students.
Because
right?
you can have a lot more enrollment.
Yeah, okay.
I think between 1/3 and 1/2 of our enrollments, our seats at UIS are online.
And these are additional students who might not attend UI Springfield?
Who might not be able to attend. And they can be from all over the world.
And does it cost less? Is there lesser charge for the students to take an online class?
no, there's more of a charge. We charge a $25 technology fee per credit, but we charge in-state tuition to everybody who's online.
And regardless of where they are in the world.
Yeah, and we don't make them pay for the gym.
Okay.
The on-ground fees
Yeah.
that you have. So it works out that it costs about the same.
Okay. So the real advantage here that I'm assessing is that it's a great advantage to the students because of the flexibility it gives them. There seem to be some advantages in learning, particularly in the classes you're describing where there's more interaction. What still has to be fixed in order to make this much more prevalent?
It is very prevalent.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
it's more prevalent than you maybe know.
Well, it's prevalent at the university level. I don't see it, for example, at the high school.
At the high school level, it's a kind of a different model.
Right.
And some of the things you're seeing with MOOCs, it's the same mistake that, for some reason in North America, online learning evolved to this very interactive, discourse-centered teaching. At the K-12 level, it's not like that. At the K-12 level, you have, it's kind of the open university model, where you have a tutor, you have a canned course, you have a tutor, and you have rolling admissions. So it's a tutor interacting with a student, and there's no social element to it. There's no cohort like there is
With a class?
with most higher ed classes.
Yeah. So do you see this kind of online learning model being applied in secondary, high school level secondary education, or even elementary education? Or is it really something where you need to have people who are adults?
The way it's working as a cohort model in K-12 is as a blended learning model. So the cohorts is a physical cohort, but they're maybe taking calculus because they don't have a calculus teacher, or some kind of a language or something extra that they couldn't do otherwise, and they have a teacher on site who's watching them as they work in this cohort.
A teacher who may or may not be licensed to teach in calculus or certified to teach in calculus,
right?
But who would know enough
But
to
who
actually
they're all working
direct
together, or you have 3 classes in different places who are you don't have enough students for one teacher. So
Okay.
they're using
Yes.
online to do that sort of thing.
Okay. So one last question before we run out of time. A lot of people, when they think about online learning, they talk about Khan Academy, which is a great source of lectures that are filmed. But talk about that. Is that really online learning, or is that just seeing a lecture online? And we only have about 30 seconds to answer this question.
It is, but it has a lot of analytics behind it. So real teachers can use it to put their kids into it and see how they're doing and diagnose what their problems are and things like that.
So
and
it's
it's
like
very
this,
well done.
It's like this blended learning. You can't just turn it over. You have to integrate that into your classroom and into your...
Well, some people use it to learn too, just like the
Yeah.
same way my daughter used it.
Okay, right. Well, thank you so much, Karen.
You're welcome.
It's been a great pleasure. This is an abiding interest of mine, as you can see, and it's I always learn a lot when people like you come on and inform me about them. So thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me.
And we've been visiting with Karen Swan, professor at University of Illinois, Springfield. Thank you for joining us once again for Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can find us online at publicperspective.tv, and you can also see us on the air every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19. So until next time, thank you and good night.